everybody. Welcome to Playbook by Laserforce Loveland. This podcast is a platform for laser tag players to geek out about strategies, stories, and ongoings in the Laserforce scene, and for you to join us as another player at the table. My codename is Mischief. I'm a player from Loveland, Colorado who loves to talk tag, and tonight I'm joined by Odin's Fist.
Odin's Fist.
There's nothing really special or noteworthy about Odin's Fist.
No.
I was pretty desperate to find someone to get on and talk about this with me, so I basically put out a mass Craigslist ad, and Odin was the first to respond.
Yeah, Mischief brought me into the arena and showed me Space Marines 5, and so now I'm talking about it.
Right. And we're very proud of you, Odin's Fist, doing something with your life. If only it were something useful. This is not something. Anyway. I'm the one to talk. I'm the host. All right. So now we're going to talk about the commander position in Space Marines 5. Odin, what is commander?
You cut out for me, so I couldn't hear
what
you say. I heard you say Odin.
I asked, what is commander?
Oh, commander is a position in Space Marines 5. You have 2 shot power and 3 hit points. So it takes you 2 shots to put down an enemy commander or heavy. And it takes 3 shots from a scout or a resupply to put you down. And you have a special ability called a nuke, where you hold down your special button when you have 20 special points, and it activates a nuke with a voice line that plays. And once the voice line ends, if you haven't been deactivated, it deactivates everyone on the enemy team and takes 3 lives off of them. And it gives you a 500 points, which is pretty neat. You also have missiles. Missiles are fun.
Pretty sick.
Yeah.
That's a lot of weapons. Seems like a lot more weapons than most other classes get.
Yeah. They're special like that.
Yeah, they kind of are. I would say that for most people, maybe it's the actual abilities of the commander. Maybe it's the way that they can score so many points. Maybe it's the fact that they're called the commander, but most people really covet the commander position and put it on a pedestal, I'd say. And at a high level of play, you realize that all 6 players matter in forming a winning team, but the commander tends to get looked at like the offensive carry or the most important player. I would disagree with them being the most important player, but you know, they're very powerful. They can impact the game in some significant ways.
Yeah. I mean, like, typically the commander takes charge because the nuke is just such an influential ability. And the commander has a lot of like threatening power because they have 2 shot power and because they are a 3 hit. So it's pretty easy for them to just kind of like push through a scout or 2. And so typically what happens is that the commander is seen as like the offensive leader of the team.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I think separates a commander from the other classes is the nuke ability. The nuke is super powerful, you know, takes out the entire enemy team, and a lot of the game is built around nuking. And for that reason, we've actually put out a different episode about nukes prior to this episode. And you can go check that out wherever you're watching this or listening to this. So the 10 tips for commander tonight will likely involve nukes to some degree, but we're going to try to focus on things outside of just nuking and all the nuke stuff. That's why we did that. It was like such a large conversation, and it was going to dominate so much of how to play commander that we decided to make it its own episode.
It was a very long conversation, and it's all very important information and details. But there's, you know, beyond just nukes, there is the commander as a position in the same way that like scouts don't have nukes, and there's still, you know, a significant amount about playing scout That doesn't have to involve nukes because you don't have them.
Right. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off with my first tip: practice standard games. This is something I've observed for a while. Odin, and you might disagree with me, but I think Commander is one of the easier positions to become just average at. I've seen a lot of players, it's almost like there's two archetypes. You got players who are like really strategically minded, and they're learning Space Marines at the same time as they're learning laser tag in general. Like Space Marines is one of their first exposures to the game. And they kind of work up through our standard progression. Scout, medic, and ammo usually come after that, and then you get into Commander and 3-hit, kind of like going up through level of impact towards the game and the level of responsibility you bear. But sometimes we get kids or people who they've been coming to play on Friday nights for a while. They're super good at running around the arena, destroying people from the general public at standard games and color conquest and zombies. And then they start playing Space Marines, and they instantly start out with this super high floor on Scout. And as soon as they're getting that, I find that if I put those players on Commander, they usually start out with a pretty good leap just from being able to run in, shoot a bunch of people, and drop a bunch of nukes with absolutely no direction or idea why they're doing it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I think like a part of this ties into like the way that I kind of practiced Commander towards the start was by practicing Scout. To get better at Commander, I would play Scout. And when you go in with a Scout mindset and you play as a Scout, but as a Commander, you'll just do better because you're a Scout, but with more power, right? Like you just are stronger.
You're like a swole Scout.
Yeah. And so, you know, when you're like doing really well in Scout on members nights and you're scoring 7,000, 8,000 point Scout games, and then all of a sudden you go in and you're just way stronger, you can do the same thing, but with a lot more success. And that's a very simple and straightforward way to become personally successful at Commander, to like improve your performance on a personal level, like how well you are doing, how many points you're scoring, your hit diff, things like that. Which the difference between individual play and team play, I think, is really that big line between like Space Marines players and really good Space Marines players, which kind of puts Commander into this like easy to learn, hard to master category, right? Because
yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
It's pretty easy to pick it up and to like roll over people with your power and strength. But you kind of have to usually when you see players improve in the game, they kind of improve through like phases. And one of those phases is the personal development, like actually just doing well for yourself. But once you cross that threshold where you need to start focusing on team play in order to actually improve and do better in tournaments, it's really hard to shift your mindset. And it takes a lot of work and effort in order to like actually master the craft of like playing around your team and what your responsibility is on the team, and understanding that you have deeper roles than just score the most points as easily as possible. Versus like there's some other positions that are maybe harder to learn but easier to master when you cross it. Like I think there's an insanely high skill ceiling for the game in general, but like when you're playing heavy, for example, it's like really hard to play heavy effectively because you get punished so easily for like any mistake. Like you stepped out too far, so you got shot in the phaser by a scout, you got triple tapped, or oh, you got a bad timing on your resupply. But once you figure out these things, because of like the function of the heavy, and because it's so team reliant to begin with, once you pick it up and you understand how to play and you understand how to like minimize your mistakes, then it just translates really well into high level play to begin with. So there's not really that much of a leap between a like
Pretty much.
solid heavy and a master heavy.
Like, yeah, commander is a class. Commander and scout are classes that, in a pinch, you could basically just give someone the instructions, get them, and that'll compensate. Because if you are out shooting lots of people with absolutely no rhyme or reason, and you're dropping your nukes when you're getting them, you're gonna do all right as commander. So this tip is just to emphasize that a huge part of commander play, like a core foundation, is just your ability to duel, outshoot, play the arena well, like you play in standard games. So the tip is to practice standard games. If you can't play standard games well and beat up on the gen pub, you're not going to play commander well no matter how much theory you have, because just the being able to assert yourself on the field and get lots of points, it's just too essential. It's too much of a foundational skill.
Yeah. The point scoring is a really important concept, and commander is this really interesting position where you kind of want to be really well rounded, even if you have a win condition in mind. Because you can't really ensure anything in the game, right? And commander is just expected to contribute in like every aspect of the game. So like you have to be capable of helping your team defend. You are a 3-hit. You also have to be capable of putting pressure on the enemy resupplies because you're your team's most reliable means to eliminate them. You also have to be able to help control the midfield and do zone control because your scouts can't duel the enemy commander all game long in order to take good positions. And you just kind of have to be able to do everything. And a big part of that is just like being able to fight by default. Like the trading with people and the like taking good shots needs to kind of just be ingrained in you before you can take these steps to actively think about the game state overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to go to your next tip or your first tip?
So like kind of leading off of that and leading off of like commander responsibilities, as a commander, you need to understand that you are the offensive force. You have a much better stock of resources than the heavy does, and you're a 3-hit, which means that you are able to do a lot more in the field than the heavy is, or a scout, and you're expected to lead offensive plays. But I feel like a lot of players have a tendency to view offense and defense in the game very one-dimensionally. Like they see offense as offense is killing the enemy resupply and defense is protecting your resupply. But there's a lot more to it than that. Like if you're on a battlefield, right? Like say you're on like a very massive, wide open battlefield, like just running through plains or something. And there's like two battle towers in the middle that nobody has control over. They've been there for like centuries or whatever. And two armies are storming each other. Like just because those are the enemies right there and you need to kill them doesn't mean that that's the only thing you should be doing, right? Like if you take these battle towers, it will give you a more advantageous position and it gives you better opportunities throughout the fight to like have better pressure. And so rather than your mission just being killing the enemy resupply, your mission is actually to attack the enemy team and take control of the battlefield. One of the main ways to do this is through taking territory. And this is a lot easier to explain with a map. But pretty much every arena tends to have key points that have like good visibility and coverage of certain routes. And as a commander, one of your greatest weaknesses is going to be being shot in the back by scouts. That's just what's going to destroy you. It's just eating shots from scouts that make you weaker. And then the enemy commander can put you down in one hit, or you'll be put down anyways. And so what you need is you need your scouts to be in the good spots and the enemy scouts to be in the bad spots. And the way that you do that is by taking control of zones as a commander and then allowing your scouts to fill in the space. Because if your scout is there, then that means that the enemy isn't, which means that now this angle is covered. And that is an offensive maneuver. Even if it's closer to your side of the arena, kicking the enemy team out and putting your team there in order to cover these crucial points in the arena is going to enable you to have a stronger offensive. And this is the kind of leading that you have to do as a commander. You have to take it up as your own initiative in order to kind of designate these locations and to take control and to plant your scouts there. Because the battle plan kind of comes down to you. It comes down to what enables you the most in order to have the most success. So if you need scouts to hold certain platforms or certain corners and say, hey, can I have you in here so that you can watch my back while I go up this ramp? Or if you need a scout to come with you because you need someone to just go in first against the enemy heavy and try to take a shot off, then you need to grab a scout and tell them to do that. They have their whole own game to play. They have their own positioning they need to worry about, and backtracking and trading against people, and a lot of things that they have to watch. And so it's up to you to kind of relay what it is that you need, and then it's up to them to step in and kind of fill the role. But you're just an offensive leader, but don't tunnel vision in on resupplies, I guess is like the main point here. The commander is just designed for trading blows. So, it's okay to get up in there and say, okay, I'm going to kick them out of this spot so that we can take control of this. Scouts are not designed for trading blows. They are pawns. They are good tools to utilize. They can do a lot if you can get them in creative positions, but they will get eaten alive if they're in a bad spot.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that analogy that like scouts are kind of like pawns. And I would say that the commander, if we're doing a chess analogy, is like the queen. It's sort of like the most important unit that has the flexibility to be moving all about the field.
Yeah.
Right. The heavy's technically a commander and heavy go toe to toe, and the heavy will win the initial fight. But the heavy also is much slower at getting resupply. They can hold much less resupply, and they don't benefit as much from using up their resources.
Yeah.
Like you want the commander using all their shots to gather points and turn them into nukes.
Yeah.
So, and what you're touching on with like controlling territory, like these are things that come when you learn the game of Space Marines and you begin to look beyond, oh, I need to just shoot people. Because that was my first tip. The base of it all is shooting people and dropping nukes, but high-level commander play becomes much, much more complicated than that because of how important it is that you're on the battlefield.
So that's my infamous sub-tip. You need to be on the battlefield. A lot of commanders have tendencies to do really cheeky things that might allow them to get nukes faster or something. And these are potential cheese strategies that you can do, but the impact of removing your influence on the field for any reason is massive. Like it is very, very much a large sacrifice. And like, if you think about like to make a StarCraft analogy, like a six pool or like a Zergling rush, you're committing a lot to a strategy that is very like high risk, high reward potentially, but you need to acknowledge what those risks are. Like you are sacrificing so much by removing yourself from the field. So if you're in a multi-floor arena and you're saying, I'm staying downstairs to get an early nuke, you have to have a concise plan with your team about how that's a win condition for you. How are you using that early nuke in order to win? Because otherwise what you're doing is removing yourself from the field for the start of the game and then providing something to your team that they won't be able to capitalize on.
Let me jump into my next point based on that, because my next point is pace your resupplies based on the field. And the whole reason that resupplies gets an entire tip from me is because of how important your presence is, and the fact that when you go back for resupplies, you are removing yourself from the field and you are being deactivated the whole time. So taking the commander off the field to get resupplies means that everyone else has to be able to compensate for your lack of presence. Like, there will be consequences if the enemy team capitalizes on you getting resupplied. So just a couple general tips or general notes. You have a pretty slow shot refill speed. You can get a maximum of 60 shots, but you only get 5 shots per resupply. The scout, who also gets 60 shots, gets 10 shots per resupply. And the heavy, who gets 5 shots, they can only get up to 40. So you have this extra large pool that you can have for shots. And it takes forever to fill it up. Actually, I never calculated this. I'm going to do it real quick. If we wanted to fill you up, 60 divided by 5 equals, you need 12 resupplies to get completely full on shots. And if we multiply that by 8 seconds, you would need to take 96 seconds, which is a minute and a half plus. If you wanted to get completely full on shots, you have to remove yourself from the field for over a minute and a half, which is just nuts. And that's if you're getting back to back to back to back resupplies. Your lives are in a little bit of a better situation because you get 4 lives every time you're resupplied, which is, I don't underestimate that, as opposed to getting 3 like a heavy or an ammo. But you still can resupply rather slowly. I just don't find that commanders need lives as frequently as they need shots, because you have the shield and because of your high starting pool. If you get a double, you'll start with 19 lives. But anyways, resupplying is costly and requires field presence from your team. So the way that I would approach resupplying as a commander is based on the field you're playing in. You want to be as efficient as possible with your resupplies. When you're getting resupplied, you want to figure out, how full do I need to be? It's completely contextual. Let's start with a good situation. Let's say that you have done well in the early game, your scouts and you have taken over most of the middle field, and your heavy is full. And now you're going to come back for resupply because you're low. You could potentially get all the way full. You could potentially go that minute and a half, and the enemy team won't really be able to push all the way into your resupply. But think about what you're sacrificing while you're doing that. Even though you're safe, you selfishly are getting full, you and your resupply with all that alone time, your scouts aren't able to break the enemy team. And if your 3-hit, if your heavy goes all the way to attack as well, just be ready for the potential of a counterattack. Like, if they attack while your heavy's gone, now you're going to have to stop getting resupplied and defend, and you won't be using that time attacking, potentially in a place where you're going to be able to rack up more special points. I think in small arenas where it's more elimination focused, it's potentially better to view yourself as like 40 shots is basically full. And then everything beyond that is more like, do I have the luxury right now? Are we really in that good of a spot to continue? If you're in a large arena like Detroit, where if you get pushed out, there's so much room to backtrack, and it's more of a long game, those are arenas where I think it's better to get completely full before going back out. And the reason is basically, every time you're transitioning between the field and your resupply, that is completely wasted time that you're not actually fighting anybody or getting resupplied. So think of it like breathing. Just as a general practice in SM5, you don't want to be doing this, right? Because like, you get a resupply, you go out, you fight, you get low, you come back, you get a resupply, you go out, you get low, you come back. Like, there's so much wasted time in transit when you keep going in and out of the resupply. Ideally, you want to do a huge fill, and then you go out on the field and you spend like the next 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes just slowly cranking out shots, getting nukes, being able to stack, being able to keep up the pressure, never leaving the enemy team alone. That is so much more effective. Let's see. And just to end that point, now it's not always easy for you to go get resupplies. A lot of times you're going to have to settle for just getting a couple, because when you leave the field, sometimes the enemy team capitalizes by instantly taking all the space that you were previously holding. That's what they should do, because you leaving has a lot of consequence. So something that I would recommend looking at is sort of like a shove maneuver. If you're on the back line and you can look into the midfield, you can prevent people from getting in on you, come back and get like 1 or 2 resupplies, and then just sneak back out a little bit to continue shoving people out of your immediate backline. What this does is it allows you to prevent a huge transition all the way back out to the very front line, but you're still keeping some territory through your vision. It's kind of like you're fighting from the resupply in a way, and just outside of the resupply. If you can like just make a few trips to do that, it kind of helps your team maintain that territory while letting you get full in small spurts. It's sort of like best of both worlds. It's something I've done a few times and it's worked pretty well, depending on the arena. All right, what do you got, Odin?
Yeah.
Based on all that.
I think resupplying is such an important thing to talk about for every class. Well, I think there's like a lot of other things to talk about, a lot of stuff that isn't resupplying. I would still say that resupplying is a solid like 25% of learning how to play a class well, is understanding how to resupply.
It's a skill.
And I think it's really important for commander. I think your presence on the field is just so important that you just need to know how to resupply. You need to know when, right? Because if you go back and you're critical on lives and shots, then that means that you're just going to be out of the field, right? And sometimes you just needed to stay out. Maybe you were like eliminating a player that you heard was on 2 lives or something crazy. But a lot of times it's very possible that what you were gaining by staying out that late just simply wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth removing yourself from the field for so much longer of a period of time. And I think like a big part of respawning as a commander is making sure that you're losing as little as possible while you're back. So a part of this is like timing your resupplies well, where the enemy team just isn't pressuring very much. Like maybe both the enemy 3 hits are back resupplying, and you just aren't going to be able to break them as a commander. It's just not worth hitting your head against the wall and you're low and you're like, okay, it's going to take me a long time to get something out of the situation, whereas I could be resupplying instead. Or maybe you're playing in an arena that's very long, and it takes you a lot of resources to get in on the enemy resupply, and that's just what you're trying to do. And you say, okay, like I maybe have enough for another attack run, but then I'm going to have to be running back to my team while I'm really low and not going to be able to do anything on the way there. It's maybe better to just head back, make sure that you're reestablishing control of the field, and then get resupplied. The other thing is like making sure that you resupply as efficiently as possible. And like obviously everyone wants doubles, and that's like the fastest way to resupply, but also you need to acknowledge what you really need. Because if you can come back and just say, just give me shots real quick, just give me shots, you can get a clip of shots really fast, and then they can double you while you turn on. Sometimes that's faster and more efficient for you than going in and waiting for doubles every time. Especially because as a commander, you just are going to need more shots because you have 3 hit points or 3 shield power. If you have a 1-to-1 hit diff, then on average, not including missiles and nukes, you'll be losing 1 life per about 2 shots. You get shot by an enemy commander and a scout, or you get shot by the enemy commander twice. Maybe a scout shoots you 3 times, but sometimes a heavy puts you down in 1 shot. If you assume roughly 2 shots per life, you're just going to need to fill up on shots more. It's just, and sometimes you go out there and you get wrecked, and sometimes you just really need lives, and it's just better to make sure that you have them. Just make sure that you have these priorities, right? And maybe you're at 20 lives, so you're not full, but you need shots. You can relay to your resupply like, oh, I need shots a lot more, right? Because if they mess up doubles and you get a clip of lives, that's a clip of lives that you really didn't need. And now you're delaying the resupply. And these things happen, especially like a lot of arenas will have IR issues and stuff, like stuff that's beyond just the theory and this is how we should be playing the game. Like, the fact of the matter is that we play a game that requires equipment and technology that isn't always functional, And so make sure that you're taking your priorities into account while you're filling up. And really your goal shouldn't be to be in the resupply forever. Your goal should be to fill up as fast as possible. And sometimes what that means is that you have to ask your heavy to just stay up and defend you while you resupply. Sometimes that means that you can't send your heavy out. You just need them to hold the line because both enemy 3 hits are forward, and you can't handle him going out and punishing the enemy resupply or something. You just need them to be held off while you fill up. Or sometimes it means that you need to drop a nuke right before you fill up and have your team go punish the enemy team so that they're creating enough pressure to pull them off so that you can fill.
Yeah, that's the one maneuver I really wanted to mention was like, if you come back with a nuke and you send everyone out, usually, well, hopefully after you nuke, the enemy team will get chased around by your team and they'll buy you like 30, 60 seconds worth of no pressure from the enemy.
Yeah.
I just think that's a good strategy.
Yeah, I actually think that's, in my opinion, like at a high level, that is just the ideal way to play. I think there's always going to be other options, but like that is ideally how it works. Is you come back, you drop a nuke, your team gets to capitalize on it, and you get to resupply off of the pressure. And so you're not losing much from not being in the field because the other team isn't in a position to reclaim any territory anyways, things like that.
Right.
I think also, if you can afford it, if the pressure isn't too much, it's good to send your heavy out while you refill in order to allow them to control the field while you fill up. So that when you go back out, you don't have to reestablish yourself. A lot of commanders will lose a ton of momentum after they resupply because they go out into the field and they have no clue what's going on. And they have no midfield control. They have to start from scratch, and it's really oppressive. And part of that is that heavies will like to just attack resupplies when they go out. So you might have to communicate that. You might have to say, oh, can you just like keep them out of big box while I fill up or something? Or, can you just push forward a little bit and hold the midfield? But like using your heavy to maintain the situation can help you ease your way back into the field a little bit. There's a lot that you can do. It's all very situational. And so a lot of it just comes down to like learning the game and getting experience. But the main point is that your goal is to resupply. Your goal is not to send your heavy out. Your goal is not to become a defender for no real gain. Your goal is to get in there, get resupply, and get out as fast as possible. While making sure that you have resources. Like you don't want to leave the resupply with 15 lives because you'll just end up right back there.
Yep.
But that efficiency
honestly
is
view you getting resupply as an act of service to your team, not even as something selfish. I see a lot of newer commander players doing that where they're like, I have to defend my team, they're in trouble, and they're just like fighting low by the resupply, and it's like, you can serve them by making yourself the top priority and getting back out on the field. Because like you alone have the resources and shield power to go stand in the middle of 3 or 4 of them and try to fight and hold them all off while the rest of your team gets full. Which,
sorry, go.
that's another tip of mine, but
yeah,
I don't want to skip there.
Playing off of that, this is something that I would normally say to heavies, but it's okay to lose sometimes. And I don't mean the game overall. I mean it's okay to get beat up, you know? Like,
it's never okay to lose a game.
It's never okay. You're never allowed to lose.
Just not okay. I've never lost a game.
I've never lost a game before. I've played one game of Space Marines 5 when Luke brought me in. It's okay to lose a little bit. It's okay for your team to get beat up. You know, you don't have to hold the line forever. And a lot of players get stuck in this hero mode mentality where they say, "Oh, I'm the only person who can keep them off of my team. Why do you need to?" Like, yeah, it's nice, but like if you're low and you're just getting beat up, you don't know what state your team is going to be in when you go back. Just because you're doing a bunch of crazy stuff in the midfield doesn't mean that your team isn't getting beat up. There's like a reasonable chance that a couple people just slip past you and are still beating your team up and you just don't know. And then you go back and you can't get resupply, you know? Like, it is way more important to make sure that you have resources. I even saw in finals at Nats this year for the last game that we played, Brisbane's medic died out really quickly. And they actually did an insane amount of work. Like, the game was stalled out really long, and they did a lot because they made sure that they had resources and that they were able to put themselves in strong positions. If, you know, Rusty or Taipan said, "Oh, our backline's getting beat up, I'm just going to go hold the line in the midfield," and ran themselves down to like 5 lives when the medic died, that would have been it. You need to make sure that you have resources the same way that everyone else on your team is responsible for making sure that they have resources. I have almost never seen a game go well where somebody decided to go hero mode and try to just hold the line on their own. It almost never helps them. Usually there's better things to do. If your team is getting beat up that hard where you feel like you are the only one who can do anything, then be more opportunistic. You can play a little more selfishly sometimes. You can look for alternative win conditions, but just holding a line is not a win condition, right? Like, you have no end game goal with it. And so it's better to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. That was a lot.
Man, no, I love it. Honestly, can I skip to one of my tips down the road? Because I think we're just like hovering over this topic, and I wanna take advantage. Yeah. This is the most important tip for me. It encompasses the way I think Commander is best played, and it's sort of like I would call this my secret sauce. So I'm just putting it out there for the people, and it's called take the low hanging fruit. So, if any of you have played a game like Seven Wonders, Wingspan, Catan, these are all games where there's sort of like a pool of resources in the middle of the table that all the players have an opportunity to share or steal from each other. And there's a bunch of ways to win. And if you come into these type of games thinking, I am going to try to win with method number 1, when method number 4 is widely available to you at the table, you're going to lose. If you come in thinking, I'm going to play the cards I'm dealt, I'm going to play whatever is right in front of me, you have a much higher chance of winning. It's kind of like, here's another analogy. Like, let's say that you go hunting for a whale in the ocean, right? You want a big whale. It's going to feed your family. You're going to make so much money with this whale. I don't know. I'm not a whaler. I imagine they're very valuable. But, you know, maybe you're out there for days and you never find a whale, but you see a ton of sharks and you refuse to switch your expectations and catch some sharks. What's better? Some sharks or nothing? Just because you wanted a whale. I think SM5, when you're playing Commander, is a lot like this. I've listed out some potential win conditions for the commander. Killing the medic, farming a lot of points and dropping lots of nukes, shutting down specific enemy players, protecting your team and farming lots of points in the process, controlling important areas that snowball into your team being able to score a lot more points, enabling other team members to pop off. Like, you can come out of a game of Commander with a 6,000 score or a 13,000 score, and like the scoreboard can look vastly different. You can win a ton of different ways. Sometimes you go play Commander and you end up with a horrible hit diff. You just tanked a ton of shots, but you allowed both of your scouts to basically use you as a distraction, and they both score like 8,000 points, and then your team wins. Or sometimes you're able to like find these openings and kill out the medic really quickly. Like, you don't want to come into a game of Commander thinking, I will win this way. You might have some ideas. You might know how the enemy team plays. You might know your own team's strengths and weaknesses. You might know your own strengths and weaknesses. You might have ideal situations and situations where you're uncomfortable because it's like, I'm not doing something I know how to do very well. But you got to play the hand that's dealt to you when you're playing Commander. You get in there, you follow standard SM5 good principle. You want to control territory, you want to score lots of points, you want to attack the enemy team, you want to keep your resupply up, but you want to take the low-hanging fruit. Look for opportunities that present themselves well to you and seize them. Be okay with your game, your win condition and your script going differently than you expected it to. At any given moment, like, every 5-10 seconds, your objective should probably be just evaluated. Don't actually stop to think, but like, while you're making decisions, you want to make use of every moment of the game. If you're not doing something important for your team, you want to be resupplying with nothing in between, as we just mentioned, with how important your presence is. So here are some example objectives that a commander might do if they saw the opportunity present itself in front of them as a low-hanging fruit. Attack the medic when the heavy is not directly looking at you and blocking your way. Prevent enemy resupplies when the enemy team is trying to sit back and get a bunch of people full, leaving you with a bunch of free targets. Defend your team in a situation where your team really needs it and you can benefit by getting lots of points. Holding an important territory and farming lots of points without attacking aggressively. Aggressively nuking when you see an opportunity. Defensively nuking when your team is about to face a huge consequence. Getting resupplied. Pressing your advantage, which is when you go shots critical because you are in such a good spot that you are deciding, hey, I'm going to keep attacking and soaking up lots of points, having this impact on the game, and at the cost of going almost critical or all the way to zero, I'm going to make that choice. Or if none of these things or no other good options present itself, I would do what I call a mulligan, which is where you essentially retreat, fill to halfway, or just get a resupply or two, and then go back out looking for another opportunity or just farming on the defensive. You sort of like, if you don't see a good opportunity in front of you, just change the place you're standing in and see if a different good opportunity presents itself. Yeah, there's my secret sauce. I think it relates pretty heavily to what we were talking about with just like the opportunistic nature of the role and making sure your resupplies are efficient, because when you're on the field, you have so much power to do any of these things that could potentially change the game for your whole team.
Yeah. I think it's all good stuff. I have a lot to say. I think I'm going to be a little cheeky for a second.
What we got?
And I'm going to say that all of those win conditions are kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So
we'll talk more about that.
Yeah. I think that a lot of things that you do as commander are a lot more impactful than you realize. I think that everything leads into something else, right? So, like, for example, controlling important areas is shutting down enemy players. Um, Shutting down enemy players protects your team, and protecting your team enables your teammates. And when you enable your teammates, you're creating a favorable situation on the field, which allows you to push to kill the enemy medic. And so I think that a lot of playing Commander is really just like looking. I feel like you kind of always have the same goal. I think it's always just looking at what steps can you take to get there. So there's a lot of things like, say your scouts just really cannot hold territory. You have these key positions where you want to put them, but one team is going to get control of those at any given point in time, and your team is just not getting it. You are having a hard time pushing them out. Every time you put a scout there, the enemy commander goes and flushes them out immediately. You just cannot hold these spots. Maybe you just need to look to slip through. Maybe there's an opening closer to the enemy resupply, actually, where you can just slip past because they're so focused on holding these spots that they're leaving an opening. And so I agree with like the low hanging fruit and the like. You really want to be as opportunistic as possible. I think your goals generally remain fairly similar. It's a matter of like the means to the end, you know.
No, I agree with you. It kind of goes back to our very first tip. Like, you can literally just go in and shoot people with no rhyme or reason, drop your nukes, and be a relatively successful commander. Because no matter who you're shooting, you're shutting someone down, you're getting points, you're taking it's laser tag. You want to be a successful laser tag player, and if you keep putting yourself in situations where you're losing because you're stuck on this one specific goal, then you're going to have a bad commander game, regardless of how important that objective was. If you don't succeed at it, it would have been better for you to succeed at a less important objective than to fail at your more important one.
Yeah. And you know, as opportunistic and flexible as the commander is, really, I feel like the dynamic gameplay comes down to three things. And that's positioning, nukes, which we have a whole episode on the nukes. So, you know, you can go watch that if you want more information about how you can utilize those in various circumstances. But it's positioning, nukes, and resupply, especially the timing. And so, like, this is kind of just going to cut over into one of my other tips about tempo and rotations.
Okay.
But basically, these three things are the things that change. Your objectives kind of remain similar. You're pretty much always looking to apply pressure on the enemy resupply, no matter what. If it's not a kill arena, that's fine. Like, pretty much every action you take should do something to inch you towards pressuring the enemy resupply, right? As you're taking territory, every time you put the enemy heavy down, even if you mutual, like, you are applying pressure to the backline. Every time you force other players to take steps back, you're applying that pressure. And so even if you're not going to eliminate them in that game, applying that pressure allows you to take control of the field. It allows you to score more points. It allows you to put them in bad situations. But positioning is so important, right? You want to make sure that you're taking effective positions where you are controlling key points in the field or putting other players in bad positions where, say, the enemy commander is extended really far and is on a strong attack run, and you just can't get into the enemy resupply. It's okay to take a step back and just say, okay, I'm going to flank the enemy commander, and they're just going to be in the middle of this huge mess where they can't step anywhere without getting shot until they go all the way back.
Oh, yeah.
And so those advantageous positions are really important, but also your resupply timing, because, you know, we talked about how the commander is such an important force on the field. And so whenever you go back for resupply, it's really impactful. It's also really impactful whenever the enemy commander goes back for resupply. And so there's this thing with playing commander where a lot of people talk about rotating with your heavy, but actually every player who plays commander, at least beyond the introductory level, does this to an extent without realizing it, potentially, where you are rotating around the enemy commander to some extent. And players have tendencies and they have ways in which they play better around this, where you have options where, like, for example, you go back to resupply at the same time as the enemy commander. There's also people who prefer to go back and resupply early. They like to take a little control of the midfield, and then they'll go fill up so that they can be on opposite ends of the enemy commander. So that while they're back for resupply, you can be pushing an attack. This lets you do things like potentially attack while the enemy heavy isn't back, or if the enemy heavy is defending so that their commander can fill up, you're forcing both 3 hits to be there, and you can take control of the field. There's also benefits to the other strategy, right? Like when you're back for resupply at the same time as the enemy commander, you aren't giving up as much of the midfield control. You aren't giving up as much game state or tempo. So there's like benefits to each, but I think it's really important to acknowledge how you play and how you prefer to play, because this, I think, is one of the more dynamic concepts that's maybe a little tricky to grasp and understand. But once you pick it up, it's actually pretty simple to play around. Like, especially, like as you get used to playing against other commanders, especially in that settings, you'll play against a certain commander like 6 times. And if you realize, oh, I do much better attacking while they're back for resupply, then you can take the initiative to make sure that you are setting yourself up to have that rotation with the enemy commander where you are swapping off. Is all this making sense? I feel like I'm maybe rambling a little bit.
No. I mean, we're both rambling, but that's why we started a podcast.
That's true.
Does that lean into your third tip here? Playing against stronger players? To
an extent. So yeah, I mean, as far
as I just wanted to comment that, like one of the a lot of times really good players will prevent you from being able to do certain things, especially if you succeed at it. Like in one game, they're going to be like, okay, they're out to take this territory, so we're going to use our resources to shut them down from doing that. Just avoiding people who are really good at shutting you down is often a pretty good way to win the game. Yeah. Like there's no shame in just neglecting to fight players who are stronger than you or who have some kind of a counter to you. I think that's perfectly valid. And rotating your resupplies to where you basically make other people deal with it for you. You got to weigh the consequences, like how badly are they going to get beat up because of it? But I would rather my scout have a dud game than my commander have a dud game, Well,
and your teammates can play very creatively around it, right? Because like if a scout is only wasting a commander's time, that's a very effective use of the position.
Oh, yeah.
If you as a commander are just wasting the enemy commander's time because you are getting put down and backtracking a bunch, then all that's happening is they're net positive in nukes against you. And on the other end, if you are swapping off with the enemy commander, you can be making your heavy go fight them. And then you can go out and fight their heavy if you enjoy that more, if you enjoy sneaking around. And every time you trade with their heavy, they're not getting a nuke, they're a heavy. And you can, beat them up, and it gives you more creativity and flexibility, which is fine. It's also perfectly fine if you like fighting enemy heavies. Some people really, really, really thrive in that heavy on heavy. Sorry. Backtrack.
Yeah, commander on heavy.
Commander on commander. Some people really thrive on the commander on commander beat down. Some people really love just being out there with the enemy commander and just beating the crap out of them. And so it's a matter of finding out your play style. I think this is where one of the main ways in which individual play style really comes into play. But yeah, I mean, talking about playing against stronger players, that was one of my tips. Learn how to play against stronger players. Some players just will outperform you on commander in a tournament. It's just going to happen. And it might be because of home field advantage. You talked about how playing the arena well is very essential. And knowing the good angles and knowing effective attack routes and the way that you personally can move around certain corners around the field, gives you a really big advantage, especially on a role like commander, which demands a lot of movement. It demands you to be in a lot of places and do a lot of things. Um, but you just will be outperformed sometimes. It's just going to happen. Um, if not, then maybe you're too good for this podcast. Um, but it's important to learn how to play against stronger players, because just because an enemy commander is like, let's just say they just are better than you, that doesn't mean that you're going to lose, right? And so there's a lot of things that you can do. And this is actually something that I put most of my focus in when I was learning the game in every position, but especially in Commander, was playing against stronger players, because I'm a Sacramento player, and Sacramento was kind of, they were a bit of a powerhouse site, I feel. Um, they had a few very good players, and while I was learning there, I had to play against some people who were really good at beating down
Oh yeah.
commanders. And so I had to learn how to play against better players, because they just were better than me. And to try and catch back up to their skill level off of just experience would have taken forever. Um, and so I picked up some tricks, and so I'm going to share them here. One is to
Yeah, let's hear it.
the main thing is that you want to disrupt the enemy's gameplay. They have a way that they like to do things, and they have things that they are successful at, and you just want to try to keep them from doing what they want to do. And that requires a bit of analysis, right? But like, one of my favorite things that I would do is I would just focus on shutting down the enemy commander, and then while they're shut down, do whatever it is that I could do in the field. Because a lot of people that I have played against have a tendency on commander to kind of just play their game where they're killing scouts and trying to kill your resupply. And that game plan doesn't normally involve interacting with the other commander very much. And so by pausing my offensive play and saying, okay, I'm going to make sure that before I do anything else, I am dealing with the enemy commander. And then once they're dealt with, then I'll go into the field and do stuff. A lot of times, what this kind of ties into is preservation of your resources, and making sure that you are forcing them to go back for resupply before you do, so that you can then take that time to have presence on the field. You can take that time to launch an offensive, or you can just keep a lead ahead of them on resources. If they have to go back because they're crit or low, and you're sitting, at about half on resources, you could come back and get some early resupplies and say, okay, now I'm just super healthy. I'm just good to go. I'm just ready for like the next 10 minutes. I'll just be a monster on the field, versus they had to get enough resources to be out, but couldn't quite fill up. So this is like a good little tactic that you can use if you just are getting outperformed by an enemy commander. You just try and shut down their gameplay, and then make sure that you press your resupply advantage. The other thing that you can do is just play around your team, because a lot of times, like good commanders, the game plan revolves around them. It's around enabling them as much as you can, so that they can get more nukes off, so that they can be more successful. If you, instead of trying to take that head on and to try and trade blows, maybe the enemy commander is dive bombing your resupply, so you decide to go dive bomb their resupply, but they just do it better. Like, it's not worthwhile to play their game if they are better at it than you are. Don't mess around with that. Instead, you can play around your team. You can put focus onto helping your team out. Instead of saying, okay, my scouts are just going to have to fight them, and I'll just figure something else out, say, okay, I will partner up with you, and we'll go take a spot, and then you can do what you need to. You can take out the scouts, you could shoot the commander in the back. I'll get you into a good position so that we can work together. We can take those 2v1s, we can fight as a unit, rather than you taking the entire burden onto your own shoulders.
Yep.
And like, another part of that is basically just forcing the enemy commander into bad situations. And one of those things is, I kind of mentioned it before, but you could push past into openings towards their side of the arena so that you can create this kind of um, flank against them where they aren't in a good spot wherever they are on your side of the field. Just making sure that they aren't where they want to be is good. There's a lot of other ways where you can force them into bad situations, even on a macro sense, right? So, like, maybe they just outpace you in nukes, like really, really, really well. They are just like a whole nuke ahead of you all game long. And so they're able to use their nukes very effectively. Whereas if you trade off your nukes, you're maybe not going to be getting as much. They're like a little too late to be too effective. Your team isn't in a great position. They just have an insane amount of momentum. Um, Something you can do is maybe you could stack 2 or 3 nukes, and then you just wait until the enemy commander is overextended or they're going back for resupply because they're very low. And then you can use those nukes in order to create a huge wave of momentum for your team, where all of a sudden they went from having consistent control across the whole game to being knocked down a whole level or two as far as tempo or momentum or arena control goes. These kind of like big moves where you're just trying to kind of kick their game plan out from under them are where you'll be able to take advantage of the circumstance and outperform players who are performing better than you.
Man, this is going to be like my little bonus tip is play all the other roles. Because when you're in situations like that, where like you can't just outmuscle the other commander and you're going to have to make some pretty big brain plays, having an understanding of SM5 as a whole, understanding how the pacing works, understanding how you, because it's really your nukes. You have a nuke, and when you drop that nuke, can rocket your team into a lead or plummet you or do almost nothing. Like you're gonna want to understand SM5 as a whole in order to become a master level commander, which I'm not even claiming that I am. I'm still learning all the time, every single week. Oh, that was a stupid place to drop my nuke, or that was way too early, or that I knew better because I could hear them resupplying and my team wasn't ready to attack. So like just becoming a holistic master of the game can help you compensate when teams are just like, because they might look like they're going to win just by being able to outmuscle you, but the commander has the unique ability to rally their team around attacks and be sort of a wild card in that you're like the only player that can be anywhere on the field you want without much consequence, without your resupply being instantly killed and being a 3-hit. Like if you have an idea and it's different, you alone pretty much have the power to make it work.
Yeah.
A scout can't really go out and do those kind of things.
Yeah, I definitely think that playing every position is important for everyone in the game. You just need to know what everyone needs. It's a team game, and at the end of the day, you're all providing the resources to each other to be successful. And that's why I think a very, very important thing is playing resupply and playing it seriously. I'll see time and time again, people just end up needing to play resupply for members nights, or they get put on it on randomizer, and they'll complain and they just don't want to do it, or they'll do it but not seriously or in a very self-serving manner. But you aren't learning when you do that. You aren't getting what you can out of it, and it won't make you a better commander player if that's what if you're going for commander. I mean, it won't make you better in any aspect, but like if you want to be a good commander player, you have to understand what it is like to be seriously playing resupply. You need to be listening to your team and taking their concerns, and make sure you're prioritizing your doubles and playing to the best of your ability. A big part of it is managing expectations, right? Like a lot of the way that we play the game is around expectations that we have of our teammates. But I promise you, anyone who's listening to this, you have some expectation of one of your teammates that is not realistic. So play resupply and learn what you can do, because it's pretty easy to say, oh yeah, the resupply is perfectly capable of just sitting in the corner and giving me flawless doubles every time. And that's what I expect. And I am basing my gameplay around expecting to go back and get perfect doubles every time. And that's just not reasonable. That's just not realistic. Play resupply, realize what it takes, realize what it means and what you can do, and play a lot of it. Play a lot of it very seriously, because there's also a huge difference between, oh yeah, this is a very evenly matched game and our heavy is doing a really good job of keeping people out and we can focus, and getting beat to crap because the enemy commander is outpacing yours and you're falling behind and you need to figure out what to do. And you need to understand what happens to your team when you are being outperformed, so that you can compensate for that, so that you can make decisions around that.
Man, Odin, I am so glad I found you randomly on Craigslist. You know a lot about SM5.
I just picked it up. It was in the video.
This seems like good advice to give.
Yeah, I'm just making it up on the spot. Actually, is it SM5 made up? I thought we were joking about it.
oh, buddy.
I watched the Space Marines 5 tutorial video on YouTube, and that's.
Oh man, how'd you like it?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so many regrets. Things to do better next time.
Redo.
Because yeah, I've wanted to do a new version, because there's a really old version that I made in high school, and then there's another one I did for Laserforce where the Logan, the voice of the PAX, comes out with an eye patch, and that's where it all went wrong. But the rest of it was honestly pretty good. Okay, extra bonus tip. You should intentionally put yourself in games where you're on a team that doesn't look very good. Yeah. It's easy to become the big fish in the small pond when you start to feel the power. You start to become one of the better commander players. You start winning games, and it's a power trip. I understand why players want to play commander and scout only and never touch resupply, because those type of players, they just love to attack. And I get it. I've been that player. Absolutely. And if playing resupply isn't your jam, we still recommend you do it. It'll make you better. But if you really want to improve your skill, put yourself in a game where, like, man, my heavy's going to really struggle against their heavy, and I'm evenly matched with the enemy commander. Because that's going to force you to learn how to do more than just go around beating up scouts and attacking resupply. You'll quickly find out why all these things that Odin's talking about matter. And if I may, it kind of leads me into my next tip, which I feel like is kind of copying yours. I put, don't complain, compensate. And it's that when your team is failing, first of all, do not sit there and be like, you guys suck. How could you not defend the area? Because you're out there trying to make plays, right? You're trying to win the game, beat up enemy heavies, get lots of medic hits, missile scouts. What if the enemy commander does that? What if the enemy commander just has a good game, or the enemy heavy has a good game, and your team is failing? You have to be able to, in the middle of the game, recognize, is this a time when I can do what I want, or do I have to make a change to stop my team from falling apart? Because even if you have a really good team against an evenly matched team, one of the teams is going to start losing the game at some point. And the enemy commander has to make a choice if they're going to make some changes or if they're going to play more offensively and just kind of ignore them. So I want to advocate for a couple particular strategies that you can use to help compensate for your team, and I want to defend why they ultimately benefit you. So defending your team. Let's say that your heavy and scouts are all low and you're like mildly full. Maybe you got resupplied early and now Basically, you have no more territory as a result of that. If you can find a good spot to defend your team from outside of your immediate resupply vicinity, here are the benefits. One, you allow your team to fill, which allows them to get back on the field and help you. If you ignore them and your team ends up getting flushed, they're going to continue to not be filled and they're going to bleed tons of points to the enemy team. And it's going to take even longer for them to get back out if they ever do. So you don't want that. Preventing the enemy from hitting their win condition, you prevent them from getting tons of points. And you can farm, because if they're focused on your team and you're holding a different angle, usually that's an opportunity to rack up a lot of points for yourself just by standing there. So this is just some early commander players believe like this isn't my job. It is. You have a dedication to your team. You have a loyalty to them, or you should have a loyalty to them, that even if they are making mistakes and they're having a bad game, recognize that if you don't change your mind to help them, you're going to lose the game too. And it is still your fault, even if you wind up with a good score and you look good on the scoreboard. I think it's a pretty immature way of looking at the game. Like, oh, well, I did my job. You can help your team do their job, and you're going to win more games that way. The second strategy I want to advocate for is the solo hard push. It's like defending your team, but it has sort of like a reverse methodology. If you are one of the only people on your team that has resupplies, and your team really needs some space from the enemy, if you solo go shove into the enemy resupply, you will force the enemy defense to focus on you. You will slow down their resupplies, and potentially you'll create space for your team to get filled. In situations like this, or even if you're defending, what you are allowing is you're allowing the enemy defense to go completely uncontested. The enemy scouts are going to be getting full, and the enemy heavy is going to be getting full. And it's possible that the enemy heavy is going to come out on the offensive. And in a lot of situations, that is like the worst possible thing for you. So this is sort of like an exchange. Like, I'm going to go and make sure that this situation that's bad doesn't get worse. I'm going to make sure the enemy heavy stays right where they're at, and hopefully draw a few scouts, maybe even the commander in the process, so that you all can figure it out and get full and get back in the game. Don't complain, compensate.
Yeah, I think that is important, like making sure that you're making the plays that your team needs. Definitely on the solo pushing, I think it's important to always have some form of pressure on the enemy resupplies, because whenever you stop pressuring the enemy backline, you're allowing them to do whatever they want. And a big part of this comes down to unit management. Like, for example, if you can go and harass the enemy resupplies, maybe they sent both 3 hits forward, and you can harass both resupplies, and you're now in a 1-on-2 situation. You're occupying 2 of their players by yourself, and they're going to have to send somebody back for you. So, you know, say they send a heavy back. Now you're occupying both resupplies and the enemy heavy, versus maybe your team is all back and maybe they are, you know, kind of holding the line and stalling out. You're creating a more favorable situation, because now you have 5 players who can hold out against 3. I think something to keep in mind when there's a circumstance like this, where like both 3 hits are forward, or like the enemy's just playing very aggressively, is if your scout can pressure the enemy resupply. Because if you can get a scout to just go slip past and pressure the enemy resupply, like the field just seems right. You're seeing like the enemy team just send everything at the wall. You can manage your resources possibly even more efficiently, because forcing a heavy or a commander to go back to deal with a scout is very frustrating for them. They're not going to be happy about that. And B,
it's almost humiliating.
It's even better of a trade-off. You're trading a scout for a 3 hit, and that just is a win. But But I mean, sometimes you have to be the one to do it, and that's fine. I also think that uh, people spend too much on enemy 3 hits, or maybe are like too greedy in one capacity or another. Um, Having a heavy be able to just bounce back and forth between both enemy 3 hits is awesome. It's great. That's ideal. You really don't want your heavy and your commander doing that job. It's really rough. If you can just have your heavy hold the line against the enemy 3 hits, and you can go do something somewhere else in the field, then you're going to have a stronger impact, because you'll basically be pulling them away, because a 3 hit just has to deal with you. That's the bottom line. Um, so I definitely think like the solo push is very important. To make, like, if you just need somebody pressuring the enemy resupply, because you do. And B, if both enemy 3 hits are forward, that's a great time to do it, to just make sure that you're drawing somebody away, because you should never be allowing them to do that. They should never get it for free, at the very least.
Definitely.
So, and as a commander, that's the ideal. It's way better for you to go than for your heavy to go. And, they have a low amount of resources to begin with, and so they're overextended, and you're having to defend against 3 hits as somebody with 2 shot power. So that's what I'd like to say on that. I also have a juicy bonus double tip, because we were talking about complaining, and we were talking about practicing and stuff before.
Delicious.
The first part of it is try to put yourself in flexible environments where, like, maybe it's like a random draw or something, or a duos tournament, something where you have to adapt to a lot of situations. You'll get a lot more exposure, and you'll learn a lot more about what you need to be doing at a given time, and what works. Because there's a lot of tricks and tools that you pick up when you play in different situations that are very universally applicable. So, like, when you just play with like the same people over and over again, you'll learn, okay, well, we can do this, and my team knows what to do about that. But you'll learn a lot more tools and develop a lot more tools if you go out and you play in random draws, and you play in duos tournaments, and you play with a bunch of different people, and you meet people from other sites, and you play in different environments where you can become a lot more adaptive. You have a lot more options at your disposal, and you have a lot more tricks up your sleeve. Being as flexible as possible will help you tremendously as a commander. And especially in those environments, being able to play resupply and scout and heavy, and watch other people play commander on your team, and to be able to understand what everyone's role in the team is, and what each position is actually capable of. Especially, going back to developing expectations, it helps you to make sure that your expectations are realistic. And then the second part of it is doubling down on calling people out as Members Nights players. Being good at Members Night does not make you good in a tournament. There, I said it. I put it out there. When evaluating players in a tournament setting, the way that they perform at Members Night has almost no bearing on how I view them as a tournament player. You'll hear time and time again that it's a different beast, and it is. When you're playing in a coordinated environment with a set team, even if it's random draw and you're mixing your positions up, just being able to go shoot people in your home field with players that you've played with hundreds of times is not going to translate very effectively. You might still be capable of shooting people, but the things that you'll be doing are going to be tried and tested against other people whose every shot has purpose. Every time you get shot down by Rusty, it means so much, and you have to be able to match that energy if you want to contest Brisbane. And that's something that is really hard to come to terms with, but it's just so easy for people to play Members Nights and to be in such a stagnant environment where they can just get better at shooting the same people and be like, oh, well, I'm shooting everyone. I'm so good. I'm getting a ton of points and winning and killing medics. But when you go up against players from other sites, and especially the top brass, like, you're playing against some real heavy hitters like Scythe or Rusty, you have to be having the impact on the game that they are, and getting a bunch of points in a members night is not going to directly translate. And so there's like no substitute for experience. Like going to tournaments is just going to give you those that amount of experience, and it's going to help you learn what you need to be doing. But a big part of it is like understanding that there's just so much above you. Understanding that there's just so much higher to climb will help you realize where you're actually at and what you need to be doing. If you just get a big head and you just feel like you're this unstoppable force, you'll hit the wall and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt so bad.
Yeah. It definitely does hurt. I kind of agree with you, and I kind of disagree. I think we're minimizing the impact of members night a little too much. Because when you come to your members night and you get to practice, I think what is good is that you get to continue to develop your skills ideally. But the rough part is that you get to play against the same group of people, and it is always in an unorganized fashion. So it's almost like you can get in the habit of every game being a members night game. And yes, tournament games are way different. They'll hit you upside the head. You'll be forced to think. You'll be forced to make intelligent, good plays at a much higher rate. You'll be punished for your mistakes much more harshly. So in that sense, I have plenty of stories where I get absolutely smacked across the head in my own arena by an outside team because I was playing like it was a members night game. But it's definitely better than nothing. I would much rather play members night games over and over than not get to practice at all. It's just be prepared to have the game, be prepared to have what's needed of you change drastically when it comes to a tournament, including knowing that you'll need to basically strategize alongside teammates. And that's something you can practice in members nights too. Like you can start to, at least with certain players, you can start, developing strategies pre-game and saying, hey, I'm going to do this opening. Can you do this coordinated one? Or, hey, I'm nuking. Can you guys all go push? Can we try one of those like coordinated nuke pushes? And that'll make your whole site better if you can all start learning good team mechanics in general together. But your point is valid. Like, it's way different when you play in a tournament.
I really just wanted to hammer it home. Playing laser tag is
just make
awesome.
Those members night members feel so bad about themselves.
Oh yeah, you all suck. If you play in members night at all, you suck. A big part of it, though, that I do really want to get across is the value of your practice. If you want to get better, then your games shouldn't be about stomping people into the ground, right? It should be about
no.
addressing your weaknesses. And you just like, I guess more than being about members night, a lot of this is just about getting a big head and addressing ego. Don't feel like you're the best player in the world unless you can pull up to a Nats and prove it, because you'll become stagnant. Especially, like if you aren't making sure that you're getting value out of members night practice, you won't grow very much. And that's something where, like, with our current site situation, our ability to practice is extremely limited. So anytime we play and anytime we go out, I am using more brain power thinking about how to improve my gameplay than I am necessarily thinking about the game in the moment, because every instance that we play is that much more important to me. And so I feel like I very rarely have games that I play that aren't beneficial to me in some way. I think I try to take as many games as possible and use them for improvement. And I feel like it's helped a significant amount. I feel like I've grown so much more as a player over like 100 games after my site died than 500 games before my site died, where I was just showing up with the same group of people and I was just playing laser tag and trying to just win each of the games, without looking at the bigger picture and just trying to stomp people whose habits I'm very used to and who I'm very adapted for. Basically, just realize that you can always improve and try to improve. Put yourself in situations where you can learn and grow rather than just trying to stomp players and getting salty at everyone, you know? Don't get angry. Think about what you could do better. When you lose a game at members night, think about why. And whenever, I think a big part too is anytime there's a shortcoming in your team, like maybe your heavy got eliminated early, what could you have done to change that outcome? Even if it's another player.
That's a good question.
And maybe they did get outshot like crazy. Maybe your heavy had a 0.2 hit diff. That's crazy. What could you have done to help that? You know, sometimes your team just gets beat up, but you could always do something. And maybe it wouldn't have led to you winning, but it at least would have been better, you know? So that was a lot.
Yeah, honestly. No, it's good.
I don't mean to.
This is really good advice.
So.
No, it's not aggressive. Like, it's giving you a little crap, but honestly, I can boast that I have I think one of the highest commander win rates at my site. I have like a 66%. Now sometimes the games are stacked. Sometimes I like get mismatched in a good way. But I think part of this isn't going to be for every person. Because being the commander doesn't mean you're the captain or the leader. But the commander, I would argue the commander has the most ability to change the team's strategy in any given situation. The resupplies are going to resupply people. The heavy's going to hold the territory that the resupplies are going to. But the commander can do 100 different things that are impactful. And I think one of my calling cards in SM5 is that I like to look at my team before the game, figure out where everyone's going, and adapt my plan around the enemy, around my team and the enemy team. Like if I know that I have a turtle heavy, someone who likes to just sit and defend, I am going to play much more aggressive, and I'm going to know that I don't need to focus as much on defending. Or if I have a weaker scout, I like to try to give them a spot that will put them in a winning position. And maybe I'm intentional about taking that territory and giving it to them so that they have a place to go rather than just letting them, walk around somewhere useless or let them get shot down all the time. Part of being a good commander is being a good team player and maybe even a good leader. So practice that in members night, and you're going to need it in tournaments.
Yeah. Particularly understanding your team. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Before I move on.
And I have a good example of this where the very first casual game I played after coming home from New Zealand, where we had internationals this year, I went in and I didn't stop and look at my team, and I didn't think about who was on my team. And I went out and just started playing the game, and all of a sudden everything was terrible. Everything was awful. I was so unhappy. I was like, oh, wow, why is everything so terrible? And then I realized that my team was being beat up like, I don't know, like a freaking ragdoll fighting a kangaroo or something.
Wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? And what it was that I wasn't playing to my team at all. I just left them to their own devices and played my own game. And I immediately, I could look at each person and realize what I did wrong. I was like, oh, my heavy is somebody who's really good at one-on-one trades, but has had to deal with the enemy heavy and commander simultaneously while I just did whatever I wanted. My scouts One of them's a really good territory control scout who I didn't help establish any territory with, so they couldn't really do a whole lot. And the other scout is someone who likes to coordinate with the commander, and I have not linked up with them the entire game. And I'm just like looking at everything. I'm like, I have done nothing right this game, even though I felt great. I was like half a nuke up. I was scoring points. I was having the time of my life. I had a few meta kits. The whole game fell apart because I was just an idiot. I was like, and part of it was because I just played internationals with a team where we had been communicating for a half a year leading up to it. And I was just so comfortable with these people that I didn't have to go out of my way to evaluate these things, right? Like we just kind of knew what we wanted to do. We knew what each other needed. We were used to playing around each other. And so I like had kind of a shock realizing that I forgot to like adapt back to actually understanding my team. Yeah, no, you have to pay attention to your team and what they need. Commander is a very team oriented role. As much as it feels very self serving, it isn't. Commander is designed to be successful. So you don't have to put as much effort into just being successful on your own. It's way better to take the tools that you have and share them with your team, you know? Like
yes.
you have a nuke which puts everyone down and gives you a bunch of points and takes 3 lives off of all of them. That's just free. You just have that. That's yours. And so like you can share that with your team and you can work together. It's a lot better to realize what your team needs and to play around that as a commander. And then they'll enable you moving forward.
That is right. Okay, we got to keep this ball moving. I've stolen your turn multiple times here. What? Give me one of your tips here.
Okay, all right. Hit diff and accuracy. I call this the growing player's dilemma. And it's because there's kind of a like paradoxical take on these as you're getting better as a player. You want to improve your accuracy so you waste less shots. Improving your accuracy is so important. People look at it all the time, especially as they're getting better as a player or like starting out. And yeah, you have to land your shots. But at the same time, you should be taking as many opportunistic shots as possible. If you see an enemy player with their lights off blitz through a window, just take a shot at them. You might not know if you'll get it. Don't wait for the tone. Don't like hope that like don't be like, well, is that a reset? Take the shot. And maybe you'll miss, maybe you won't. But as a commander, you should be taking as many opportunistic shots as possible because those are points and nukes and so beneficial for your game. And so it's kind of paradoxical or kind of ironic or kind of a dilemma because it's going to hurt your accuracy when you do that. But some of the best commanders have not the greatest accuracies. You won't see like any high tier commander come out of a finals game with a 100% accuracy. You really won't even see them come out with like a 90% accuracy. A lot of times it's in like the 70s because you just should be taking shots. And so I definitely understand like wanting to preserve your shots, and you need to work on that. You need to make sure you're managing your shots properly, but at the same time, be opportunistic. So, figure it out. And the same thing is kind of true for hit diff, right? Like you want to have as good of a hit diff as possible so that you're making sure that you're generating a positive point difference for your team and so that you're not losing very many lives. But at the same time, you're expected to lead the charge and fight difficult fights to help your team and do these things that are going to lead to you being shot more than if you just played certain corners and peeked out whenever it was ideal. But that's just something you have to do. And you have to accept that hurts your hit diff. But it's still important to make sure that you're focusing on managing your hit diff where you can. Sometimes you just have to take trades, but I think it's good to work on moving around the field in a way to where you are maintaining your hit diff. Make sure that every time you get shot down, it provides something. maybe at the very least, it just provides information. But like, if you are putting your scouts to hold spots behind you, you're moving around in a way to where you're limiting the angles that you can be shot from. And then you can say, oh, I got shot. It has to be from green platform because that's the only spot that they could be. And then you can go fight for green platform. Just make sure that you're getting something when you get shot. And it's okay to just like brawl people sometimes. Don't baby your hit diff. Don't say the only thing that matters is coming out positive, because if you do that, you're actually not going to rack up specials as fast. You can get outpaced if you aren't taking as many fights as you can. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're online as much as you can be so that you can take more shots and score more special points. So for both of these, there's a balance to be found. And a lot of it is just understanding how each side of it applies. There's a reason to lose or to trade off on hit diff to provide benefit to your team, but there's also a lot of benefit to preserving a good hit diff. There's reasons to take actions that could reduce your accuracy, but at the same time, there's a benefit to having a good accuracy. And so I think like it's good to start off by bringing both of these up. It's good to start off by making sure that your hit diff is good, you're taking good trades, and start off by making sure that your accuracy is as good as possible. And then you can kind of start to sacrifice in places and say, okay, well, that's not my focus anymore. I still want to like maintain those habits I developed, but at the same time, provide more benefit to the team and be more opportunistic.
That's a really good point. Sorry, I'm doing a little stat dive, kind of on the. I'm looking at some of the. I'm looking at some of the top commanders around different tournaments around the world, and I'm looking at their average accuracy. What was the accuracy, if you could guess? What's Rusty's average accuracy on commander at his home site? For those who don't know, Rusty has the most games in the world.
I would guess 71%.
No, it was actually 77.
Oh, nice.
But still, that's like every fourth shot is a miss.
Yeah.
What about Scythe in his home arena?
I would guess 80.
Yep, he was at 81. And then last but not least, that does not help my point. So, just gonna carve out stats that don't help my case.
You find somebody who's too good at all of it. They've got it all.
Well, it turns out that in Syracuse and Loveland, commander accuracy is up near like 85%.
There are certain arenas that lend more to having higher accuracies, especially arenas with less windows and window play.
Yeah.
Because
that makes sense.
Windows and like the small openings where people run past, that's usually where you see those accuracy dips. Because when you see somebody with their lights off in the open, you can actually take the time to aim and get the tone and then pull the trigger more often. But the point being, it's okay to be more opportunistic. Rusty is like one of the best players in the world, and he definitely had games below 70% accuracy in finals in 2019 in Detroit on Commander. Below 70% accuracy. That's like, that's significant. But I mean, he did work. He just needs shots. And going back to the resupply point, talking about how you'll need more shots than lives. Everything I talked about there was assuming that you were landing every shot. So you need even more shots, assuming that you miss a quarter of them. So for every 4 shots you spend, you have to tack an extra one in there. Or 3 shots you spend, you tack an extra one in, because that would be the 4th. Anyways,
here. Back to Sacramento. What was Venom's accuracy on Commander?
Oh gosh.
In Nats 2017.
Oh, in Nats 2017? Oh, I would guess 75.
71. This is a much lower accuracy arena in general. It's down like 10% from
Part of that was
some of
because
the
we were
others.
on Gen 6 and had terrible radios.
That probably was part of it.
The IR was a mess, and there was a ton of lag. So sometimes you would shoot somebody and see nothing happen, so you would keep shooting them until they went down. Which is another thing. Sometimes you have to take the arena into consideration, and especially when reading stats. I think reading stats is an important skill for people who are trying to work on themselves. They provide you with a lot of information, but you have to be literate in it, right? You can't just say, "Oh, lower number than other person bad," because you need to understand like what the importance of that number is and how it applies to the arena and to the game and to the players. Because I mean, obviously having a higher accuracy is cool and better, but like,
oh yeah,
Rusty having a lower accuracy than somebody doesn't mean that he lost to them, So you have to be able to understand what you're reading, and so it's something that I would recommend, and this is a universal thing, is to talk to experienced players. If you want to look at your stats and be like, "Hey, can you look at this game with me?" They could give you a lot of insight that maybe they could point out things that you didn't notice. I do game review with people a lot. I love just sitting in Discord and looking at scorecards and talking about what I notice from the scorecards. But having more experienced players give you input is like a really good way to notice more about your game. So do it.
Yeah, do it, nerd.
Do it, nerd.
All right, Odin, give us another tip.
Okay, I have a simple one for everyone.
Oh.
We like to keep it simple sometimes. My tip right here is go for missiles. It can be really greedy sometimes for a heavy to go for a missile on somebody. Missiling puts you in a vulnerable position. You basically can't shoot somebody while you're locking without the double pull, and that sucks. And also, like, sometimes you'll go for a missile on somebody and then they'll come up while you're missiling them and put you down. That sucks. And taking risks on heavy is really rough. On commander, especially if you're not defending, heck, go for the missile. Like, who cares?
Whoa, language.
You're missiling that.
If Odin's dropping heck bombs, you need to go for those missiles.
You're missiling an enemy scout while you're on 1 hit point and they come up and put you down. Okay, that was goofy. Maybe you feel a little embarrassed, but who cares?
1 shield, not 1 hit point.
Right. One shield, not 1 life. I use hit points and shield points and all that interchangeably.
Yeah, anyway. But yeah, that makes sense.
Like, who really cares? And missiles provide
you're also you're in prime position more than the heavy to get missiles, because a lot of times you're right where the enemy is trying to retreat to if you're positioning yourself well. People rarely ever reposition into your own team's defense for a missile,
Yeah, and I mean, you just have far easier access to resets off of enemy players than your heavy usually does.
Exactly.
They're just more available to you for less risk. So do it. They're 500 points. They take 2 lives off of the person and they give you 2 special points. Missile people.
Yeah, do it, nerd.
Do it, nerd. Missile them. And I mean, like, I'll tell you, the games where I have the hardest time getting missiles off are usually the games that my team is just winning. Like, they're just winning so hard. It's too hard for me to get missiles off because everyone's running and my teammates resetting everyone. And I'm like, settle down. If the other team is playing really aggressive or if they have a leg up, you can even, like, sometimes I'll let players push past me a little bit just so that they're in such a bad position that I pretty much get a free missile. I'm like, now you're in between me and my heavy. What are you going to do? You're going to eat a missile. That's what. But yeah, I mean, simple and straight to the point. Just go for missiles. Have fun. Play the game.
Yeah, it's a good point. I find when I look at stats that usually there's like a 1 or 2 missile difference between most people's average on commander and heavy. You just have more opportunities in general to get them. Special points actually mean a lot more to you as a commander than as a heavy, which means literally nothing.
I love stacking specials on my heavy.
Yeah, if only it kept track.
That would be funny.
You're just a bragging right. I got 99 specials on heavy.
New heavy ability. You hold the special button down at 99 specials and it plays the birthday song.
Laserforce, make it happen.
Make it happen.
But yeah, nothing more to say. The one thing I'll say about missiles, I feel like there's a demoralizing aspect to them in competitive situations.
Yeah.
Where if you can missile an enemy player, somehow depending on the player, you can potentially throw them off their game. You might either make them like really hesitant to combat with you anymore. You might also make them really competitive and they will hyper focus you as a result of the missile. I've kind of seen both.
I agree. I would also like to take this opportunity for another bonus tip. Don't be a bully.
What? Why not?
Don't. Okay. This isn't a tip to help you win games. Okay, if you're in Nats finals and you're like, if we missile this person, they'll get really angry and play poorly. Oh yeah, missile that person. That's a
good thing. You should do that.
However, I have noticed people, particularly against weak teams that are underperforming, go, haha, I'm going to use all of my missiles on this one player who's like a child who's new to the game because I think it's funny. Don't do that. What is wrong with you? Don't be mean.
They want to look good on the stats page.
Missile somebody else. Missile Baden. Baden can take it.
As long as we're playing a sport, there's always going to be people that really want to boost themselves up and make themselves look like the best player ever. Yeah. That's always going to be a part of SM5. So my bonus tip is you should don't ever hold a game in high esteem unless it was a really hard one to win. Like dunking on someone that you could tell before the game you were probably going to dunk on doesn't mean jack. And like that, I've actually become pretty immune to having to play against teams that are stacked against me, like to where I'm on the losing team. Because what I've decided to start doing, and yes, anyone who plays at Loveland knows I still get tilted, but what I've started doing is
like, hey Luke,
I know, but what I've started to do is when I look at the rosters and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have a hard time this game, or it's impossible for me to win this one, I look at it like, how much can I defy the odds?
Yeah.
Can I make this close? And if I even make it close, I'm like, wow, I did a good job. Or we did a good job. Or I really helped enable this scout who was probably going to not do such a good job. Then you can really feel proud of yourself. And you have no opportunity to bully people in those games. But I get it. When you are especially newer and you're just starting to become good at the game, it feels like such a power trip when you can finally like dunk all 5 missiles in a game. Yeah. Like that's hard by itself.
Yeah.
We get it. We've been there. But once you have gotten it out of your system, keep it out of your system because you want people to play with, you know?
Yeah. Well, like a lot of these things that like people will see as flexes, I've become so unimpressed by, like 5 chaining. I don't particularly care. I know there are still people who hold in high regard, but like 5 chain I don't really care about. And like, missiling a weak player 5 times because their team just isn't good, it is whatever. You know what left a lasting impression on me was back when Applesauce was still like new to the scene. She went to a tournament where she wasn't a player. She just was like a merc that was available if somebody needed a sub for a game. And she subbed on a Loveland team. I don't remember which one. It might have been like a C team. But she subbed against Detroit. and played Commander against Baden and Scythe. And I watched this kid, because she was young at the time, I watched this child missile Scythe and then drop 3 nukes in his face. And when I tell you that not a single thing has left as impactful of like an impression on me as that, I'm sorry, okay, yeah, you 5-chained some kids, whatever, moving on. But like a child who's new to the scene, missiled Scythe and 3-chained on him, yeah, that's baller. She was in Birkenstocks.
So baller. Let's go.
There's just way much more that you could do to impress me, you were able to hold Rusty out of your resupply for like 30 consecutive seconds on heavy, cool, that's baller. I don't know, there's a lot more that you can do to be good at the game that doesn't have to do with winning or just stomping noobs. But I was just talking because you brought up the demoralizing aspect of the missiles, and I think that's great to use competitively to win a tournament.
Yeah,
but don't use it to be a jerk. I'll
Definitely.
beat you up. I will personally beat you up. So
Odin will dunk 5 missiles into you.
I will dunk 5 missiles into you. I don't care if you're on my team.
All right, I got my last tip.
Right.
I'm gonna give it. You like attention as the commander, not the heavy. I hate attention as the heavy or the scout or the medic or ammo. But so as we mentioned, you can come in and play commander just by shooting a bunch of people. And I've done a video on play styles. I really think this is part of. It's just a theory. People tend to have tendencies that resemble D&D classes or different archetypes, like people who are aggressive, people who are in your face, more like a fighter. Some people are more like an assassin, where they play more stealthily, they're not as vocal, they try to hit you in the back. People are more support, some are more farming, some are more medic hits, whatever your vibe is. I think there's ways that they all fit into all the positions, but what I will say is that players who draw a lot of attention to themselves, I believe, are more optimal on the commander position than most other positions. And here's why. You are a 3-hit, so you are one of the few players who has a shield. Everyone except the heavy doesn't have a shield. And and among the 3 hits, you get your lives back quicker than the heavy. And you are the only class where mutual trades, where you tag each other at the same time, are more of a win for you than anybody else. Because every time you tag someone, you get a special point that's worth a nuke. If a scout tags you, they get a special point that's worth rapid fire, or the ammo gets a boost, the heavy gets nothing. So for most people, it's much more ideal to have a high hit diff and hit people in the back. And obviously having a high hit diff is always admirable. But the thing about Space Marines 5 or laser tag in general is that the enemy team is looking for your team, and someone is going to end up being the center of attention and getting shot. It's like if your entire team hides, it creates a vacuum, and the enemy team is going to, according to some laws of science, they're going to expand out until they reach someone on the front line and start fighting, So if you're commander and you're playing like a sneaky assassin, you're in the back and you're letting your scout get pummeled, it's quite possible that you're not playing the position as optimally as if you were the one in the front getting pummeled, letting your scout be the one taking the sniper shots. Because every time I'm in a situation where everyone's staring at me and I can trade mutually 1-for-1, I'm getting a nuke. And I have a shield, and I'm likely to stay up, and I can get resupplied on lives rather quickly. So it's like, if anyone on your team is built for being the tank of the group, for drawing attention and benefiting from it, it's the commander. Just a playstyle little, it's not even, I don't even know if it's a tip. It's more like, hey, did you know there are these benefits for you being the tank and the center of attention in the front line? So do with that what you will. I've seen plenty of commanders do fine with more of a assassin-y, sniper, high hit diff play style. I think Zev is one I would call out. Zev would kind of like, I remember 2021, he would float the midfield. People wouldn't know he was there, and he would just like rack up tons and tons of points. I think his heavy was taking a lot of attention. I think that was you, Odin.
Yeah, yeah, I took a lot of heat.
Yeah. You took a lot of heat. Our resupplies were able to the enemy resupply were able to get full and send people back out, but ultimately Zev would just kind of like pick him up. But end of the day, I'm just saying that I think this is worth noting.
Yeah, I mean, trades for you just are better, right? Like, if you trade with an enemy scout, cool. Now that scout is down and you're up. If your scout trades with an enemy scout, then those scouts are just down. If you trade with the enemy commander, then you're mutualing on special points. If your scout mutuals with an enemy commander, then your scout is down and they're up, and they got the special point differential. So, I mean, really, it's about optimizing your trades, right? Like, what's most effective. And usually that's not having your scouts fight everybody. It's putting your scouts in advantageous positions so that they can support and shoot people in the back and cover your back and stuff. So a lot of times you just got to eat the heat. And the goal really isn't just to tank everything forever, right? It's to enable your team to get into a good position so that you don't have to worry about that. Because like, if you're just getting, beat up, but you're like helping take over space and you're like making sure that like you're just brawling with the enemy commander for a little bit, then, but your scouts get into a better position, then all of a sudden you're just going to start winning those fights. All of a sudden it's a different story when their commander is down a shield power and you step out to trade. So like, it just goes back to the playing selflessly thing, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're maximizing each player's potential on the team, and everyone's got to sacrifice in some way. Scouts sacrifice all the time. At the bare minimum, what a scout sacrifices is that they just don't have priority to resupply, right? So like, it's their job to make sure that they aren't monopolizing the resupply so that you can get it, but at the same time, you go out in the field and it's like, you have responsibilities where sometimes you just gotta take some heat for the team, or sometimes you have to do like the dirty work of like pushing people out of a spot because your team just can't. But yeah, I mean, definitely it's not the worst to have eyes on you, especially because like the way that laser tag is and the way that arenas are, you can still play smart, right? Like, even if you have 3 people trying to focus you down as a commander, you can still come out and take these fights one by one.
You don't have to stand in the open. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like, I definitely know some players whose like play style on commander was to stand in the open and just be a bullet sponge. And I have not put enough brain power into understanding how that works, but they did a lot with it. But basically, it's okay for you to take some heat. Just make sure, like with the hit diff talk, make sure that you're doing it for a reason. Make sure you're gaining something when you are getting shot. And as long as you're getting something, it's fine. You're okay. As long as you aren't just getting hit for no reason. But
right.
That's a good one.
Like, you really want to be wary of like when the enemy commander is in that situation, that you're not feeding more points to the enemy commander than yourself, like with anything. But yeah, like one of the ways I know I'm absolutely failing as a commander is if I go 10 seconds without seeing anybody.
Oh yeah, you should be where the action is. Because
all the time.
You are the person responsible for influencing the field, and that just means that you have to be where the people are.
I want to be where the people are.
I actually had a
Fire
talk.
some missiles, drop some nukes.
I was we had I've been having meetings with my team for Nats this year, and
Mhm.
one of the scouts on my team was asking me like, "Oh, what are ways to?" Well, the original question was, "What are ways to be effective as a scout in the arena, or like as a general?" But like, what it came down to was that they felt like in some games they would have minimal impact because they would go extended periods of time, not seeing people, not shooting people. And I'm like, as a scout, that's okay as long as you're making sure to cover territory, right? Like the second you leave, now somebody on the enemy team can sneak in there, and now they have that spot, and they can start shooting your team in the back, and now your commander has to go take that territory back, you know. But like as a scout, it's okay to hold ground and make sure that you're covering good angles to create more safety and opportunity for the rest of your team. But as a commander, that's just not where your time is best spent. Like you should be actively influencing the shape of the field. And so that's why I typically say, and that's why a lot of players, when you talk about like zone control and commander scout interaction, the general strategy is that the commander takes space and then plants a scout there, and then the commander moves
Mhm.
on to the next thing. Having a 3-hit just sit in a spot to hold an angle sucks. Outside of like, you're heavy doing it to optimize defense or something along those lines. Um, Really, you want to be doing as much as a 3-hit as possible to influence the game. So be where the people are.
Yeah, be aerial.
Yep.
All right, what's your final tip?
Um, I think I did all my tips.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's the end of the episode.
All right. Bye, losers.
Odin, what is one thing you want players to take away from this discussion?
Practice with intent and learn to be flexible. I'm giving 2, but I'm disguising it as 1.
I like it. What are some things?
What are some things? Yeah. Yeah, those are the things. Practice with intent
Great.
and practice being flexible.
Great. I like it.
Yeah.
I want players to take away that, I want to just quote Slaughtermelon. The longer we can milk the world champion commander thing, I will do it for my bro. Slaughtermelon used to be one of the most aggressive team carry commanders you could imagine. If he wasn't scoring 12K, he had failed the team, and the team was about him scoring 12K. But after winning Nats, he told me, Commander is the most selfless position in the game.
And he didn't score 12K, and we won.
Oh, yeah. Caleb was such a team player. Didn't score 12K, but did what his team needed, and they won as a team.
Yep.
And that's what was up.
I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, same.
He's a good bean.
Good bean. All right, on that note, we're going to transition out. Everyone, thanks for listening, and talk to Odin. You can find him on Craigslist if you want to have some of your footage viewed, and they'll give you some tips.
Yeah. My Craigslist listing is pretty cheap too, so it's 1 fruit roll-up.
Odin will pay you to let them watch your footage.
In half of a fruit roll-up.
All right, bye.
Bye.